Hello everyone and welcome to our new episode of the Expat Career and Lifestyle podcast. This is Dominika Miernik, your host, and today I am coming to you with a very special guest, Dr. Zsuzsanna Tungli. She is the managing partner at the Developing Global Leaders in Asia and expert in modern global leadership. Her work over the past 30 years has spanned across Asia, US, and Europe in consulting as well as executive education. And she has recently published a fantastic book on global leadership called The Culture Key Between Asia and the West. And today in this episode, we are going to address what are the differences between the Western and the Asia culture and how you can use those information in order to thrive in your business or thrive in your international career across the globe. So welcome Zsuzsanna. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Dominika, for having me.
Fantastic. So how your international journey started, and if you can explain us more about you and what are you doing?
Okay, so I'm already over 50 years old, so it's been quite a long journey. But actually, it really was my childhood dream to travel always. And I come from Hungary, and at that time when I was growing up, actually, it wasn't that easy to travel. And I always wanted to see the world. I wanted to work abroad. I wanted to live in different countries. So I could say I'm actually have been living my dream, which is, I think, a fantastic thing to be able to say. The first thing which happened to me after some initial trips is that I was able to study abroad. That was something for me very, very important. So I did actually study, and I had to choose based on which school gave me the best scholarship for MBA, because I had to have a proper scholarship for like living expenses as well. And that's how I ended up in Italy for an MBA. Then I was thrilled because I could go for an exchange program to UCLA, the US. So that's how I started. And it's funny because, my family said that in that particular October morning, I left Hungary. They knew, I didn't know. I thought I was just going to study and let's see what happens. But they were right. And I've been living and working abroad for now almost 30 years, with actually a few years stint back in Hungary, which was wonderful for various reasons. And so I've been living, if you count like years, probably in about 6-7 countries like Thailand, Singapore, Switzerland, UK, Italy. But if you count just like a few months, then the number would be much bigger. So maybe I just stop there.
Yeah. So you have a fantastic international experience and international life across different cultures. So, like, what was your biggest challenge during this international journey, and how did you overcome it?
It was. I would say I would like to mention both on the personal and the professional level, if I may. On the personal level, actually, it's bringing up children to make sure that they are still. I even come from a multicultural marriage, so my husband is British. Mm-hmm. So to make sure that the children know that they're both British and Hungarian, despite the fact that we hardly ever lived there, although we very, very, very regularly visited. So that was one challenge on the personal level. Happy to talk longer. I could talk longer about that, of course, as well. And on the professional side, it was how to actually kind of actualize myself or fulfill my wish of working. And it wasn't easy, because when we first arrived in Switzerland, I was not allowed to work simply because I was Hungarian. It didn't matter what kind of education I had. I could not work because I was Hungarian. And actually, that's how the idea came, that I should do a PhD. Because if I do a PhD, which I did then in London Business School, then at least wherever we go, then hopefully I can teach at some universities. So basically, I created this one thing which I could carry with myself wherever we went. And that's really helped overcome the biggest challenge, how to work. But, I also lived history a little bit, because at the first time when we lived in Switzerland, I could not work. when we went back, like I think 6 years later, they asked me at the authorities, so what would you like to work? So history also helped me with the opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was like expanding your education, and this helped you to grow your career, like to take your career with you. Yeah, so in your book, because you have recently published this fantastic book, The Culture Key. So this is based on your own experience working across different countries, and you are speaking about how to be cross-culturally competent. So if you can talk more about that.
Like, what is cross-cultural competence?
Yeah, how we can be more competent, how we can develop this because this is a skill. Yeah, and how this can help us, like in our international life, when it comes to running a business, or even like in career development.
So cross-cultural competence basically is that you are able to work across cultures effectively. Wherever people come from, you are able to communicate with them. They understand what you want to say, and you understand what they want to say, because you are aware of some of the differences, some of the ways people behave, some of the expressions they would be using. I would say that cross-cultural competence was always very important, and actually that was one of the main reasons why I got into the global leadership field, because I used to do management and financial consulting, and I realized this cross-cultural competence is just key if you want to work internationally. And finally, I see that in this last couple of years, perhaps it really got a bit more importance to be cross-cultural competent. It's more realized in a wider environment, by more companies as well, and more countries as well. I think cross-cultural competence can help you whether you are working or not working, wherever you're going, to be honest, because building relationships when you're an expat is so important, not just for work, but also for being happy. And how you build relationship with the locals can be very, very, very different. So that little cross-cultural competence, that little knowledge about how people typically like to communicate, where they like to communicate, to meet, etc. Know a little bit about the food even. These are some of the basics which really help you with building relationships and building a happy expat life and expat being, really. And then, of course, if you want to work, then probably you should go a bit further. And one of the things, especially in Asia, is that it's very important that somebody else gives you the credibility. So it's not good enough if you say, oh, I've done this. Great, but it's probably not enough. Somebody else has to vouch for you. But it's very strange, because sometimes you don't even have to have somebody concrete, and that person introduces you. It can be the British Council, the French Chamber of Commerce, and basically they say, here is XY, and she or he actually can do that, so talk to her. And a lot of doors can be opened just by that. Of course, it's not enough. You still have to be good at what you do, but that little introduction just makes all the difference. So these are just a few examples how and why it's important, I think, to be culturally competent.
Yeah, I think it helps you to overcome challenges, also adapt better, and also avoid misunderstandings and mistakes that you can do during the communication, business meetings, or even during the job interview in a country that you are living, or you have moved to. Yeah, so it helps you with that. And as you said, now we are more aware about the importance of the cross-cultural differences, and also this competence to develop. And it wasn't like that 10 years ago or 20 years ago, let's say. Yeah. So what prompted you to write a book about cultural differences? Because there are many books on the topic. So what prompted you to write your book?
The misunderstandings you were referring to. Those misunderstandings and perceptions and judgments.
Mm-hmm.
because I have been working in this field now for really 30 years. It's crazy, but I see, so I've studied it as well as lived it. And I just experienced so many of these misperceptions, which are because of cultural biases which we have. Because of course, if you are not aware of what people are thinking, then you will judge or perceive, and unfortunately also judge the other person based on your own values, based on your own expectations. So I didn't like that. I didn't like that people would say, oh, you are arrogant, or you can't be a leader because you never speak up at a meeting, or etc. Or you do a job interview and basically you're not employed because you don't look into the people's eyes. So it's really so many small things, or you look too much into somebody's eyes. And I wanted to create something simple. And that's why I thank you very much. The way you described my book is that I wanted something very practical and simple so that people can take it into their hands and say, okay, so what is the minimum I have to know if I want to be culturally aware and competent, and as an expat traveling or working by myself or for a company, what are those things which I absolutely need to know? And basically, my hope is that through providing those case studies and examples and the key differences, people would be able to lift their cross-cultural competence just that little bit, which I am actually convinced that if everybody was aware of just of these few differences in the world, I think the level of communication and the level of effectiveness as well as happiness would just actually rise. So that's why I wanted to do that, and I'm hoping to achieve that through talking and more about the book and with more people.
Fantastic. So, like, based on your experience, and also you describe differences, and what is the culture in what is the Western culture, and also the Asia. So, what are like the main differences between those, let's say, two worlds?
So the way I chose the differences, because there are so many, of course, are the main ones between Asia and the West, but they could also be used actually within Asia and within the West. And whenever we talk about cultures, we have to say that we have to be careful, of course, with generalizations, because we know that a Japanese person is different from a Singaporean, or a French is different from a German, etc. But there are certain differences which you can generalize. And for the difference between Asia and the West, I identified 4 differences, which I really think are has the biggest impact on interactions. The first one is hierarchy, how people approach hierarchy, how important it is in meetings, who speaks up, when they speak up. So you mentioned, job interview, the way you present yourself, and depending on who is actually interviewing you, can be and should be different in different cultures. The other thing is indirect communication. One of the typical values in Western organizations is transparency and being open. Now, that's very good and important, of course, but how that shows up in the different cultures, it's very, very different. And in an indirect culture, which is typical more in Asia, you can't expect openness and honesty to be manifested the same way as it would in the Western countries. So that's number 2. Number 3, how we use silence in communication, because different cultures have different gaps between people speaking. And if you're not aware of it, then I had many managers who were saying, I had a fantastic meeting until you told me about this. And I said, why? What happened? Basically, what happened that they realized that they were talking. And because nobody else interrupted or said anything after they said, any questions at the end? No. They just thought it was all okay. But actually, it's a combination of hierarchy and waiting for that silence, which never came in those situations. So these are 3. And then there is one more, which actually is more diverse within Asia as well, and the West, in terms of the priority for task focus or for relationship building. And actually it's only a few countries, Anglo-Saxon countries, Germanic cultures, maybe some Northern European countries where it's really much more task focused. Like I have to be following my schedule, my task is priority because that way I behave professionally. And that actually comes across with any meeting, whether it's a job interview or a meeting in a team as well. And the rest of the world is literally more relationship focused. And certainly Asia is, where you can't just expect people to behave, to perform best unless you really build that personal feeling, touch feeling relationship as well. So this is like the 4 areas which I described, and I am convinced that these 4 are have the biggest impact on how careers happen or don't happen, and even international deals get signed or not.
Yeah, I agree with those 4. Yeah, of course, there are many differences between those two cultures, but those 4 are important. And relationship, yeah. So I lived in Italy for many years, and I know that like in meetings and also job interviews or doing business, so having this conversation or building the relationship before like going for dinner or for lunch it's very important. So it's good to know how to behave and like what is like the protocol of the communication. So you described this in a very practical way and also with some great examples, and you can also like assess your differences. How different do you feel, or where do you allocate yourself on the scale? Are you like more direct or more indirect communicator, or how do you feel about silence? So it is a great way to like also know more about you. How do you see yourself? So like you speak also about generalization. So when we tend to generalize cultures,
in order to speak about the subject, I think we have to generalize. And that's something which, I was also referring to when I say West or East or Asia. There are tons of research. So by now we don't, it's not our opinions. There's a lot of research which basically puts different cultures to different places on like cultural dimensions, which we just talked about, cultural differences as well. But we have to be very, very aware that, we may say that a typical American would behave like that, or many Singaporeans would say that, but it doesn't mean that everybody is going to be like that, because not everybody is completely typical of their own culture. Of course, the individual personality, life experience will also influence how we are. What is very, very important though, to have that background knowledge, to know what is typical, but then you meet the individual and you meet that individual and get to know that individual. And if you have that background knowledge, then it will help you with that interaction. You will probably be able to understand the person much better and react much more appropriately to that person, because you have, one more very big reference point. The typical culture is like that. But of course, then whether it's a woman or a man or what happens on that day, that will also influence the behavior. But this general knowledge is just extremely important part, I think, for international life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so knowing like the most important things about the country or the culture that you are moving into or you are living can help you. Fantastic, Zsuzsanna. So thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your experience and also your knowledge. So tell us more where we can find more about you and also where we can find your book.
Thank you very much for having me again, and thanks very much for helping talk about my book. So we have a website. I have a LinkedIn profile as well, Zsuzsanna Tungli, so on my name. And luckily my name doesn't come up so often because of being Hungarian. And we have a website, developinggloballeaders.com. So you can actually purchase the book there as well. And there's a lot more information about what we do. We actually do a lot of cross-cultural work, but also we help women to get into more senior leadership positions, and inclusive leadership is a big subject. And the book is actually available on all ebook platforms as well. So Amazon, Kobo, and basically all platforms, whichever you prefer to perhaps purchase it from.
Wonderful. So thank you very much for sharing that. So I will put the link to the website with the show notes, so people can connect with you and also to learn more about the book. So thank you very much again, Zsuzsanna, for being with us today. And thank you very much for listening to this new episode or for watching the video version. And please tell us what are your learning points from this interview, or what are your experiences when it comes to living and working in different cultures, your misunderstandings or mistakes that you have made, and how are you going to apply what you have learned in this interview today. So thank you very much again, Zsuzsanna.
Thank you very much, Dominika, and I wish all your listeners as well fantastic expat life across all cultures. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.